be consistent, because if the system can be inconsistent, you can justify any action via the statement, I choose not to be consistent about X.
Consistency is generally a good thing. I don't think that it's inconsistent to say that, let's say, we should punish.
Wait one sec. We'll get into specifically what constitutes consistency and what doesn't. But if morality has to adhere to the laws of logic, surely. If it doesn't, you can justify anything by saying, I choose not to be consistent about X.
I mean, I don't want to be irrational, so I guess I agree with you.
Yeah, okay. And then finally, when we get to applied ethics, you would believe in basic human rights. So just like a starting applied ethical position, you would agree. Sorry, by the way, I'm out walking. You would agree that, like with a statement like, in the moral system that we subjectively construct, we do not want to allow murdering humans for hamburgers when alternatives are easily accessible.
Okay, so what's your question? Like, what do I have to agree with here?
I'm asking, within your moral system, when you say, I want a moral system, I want it to be logically consistent, now I'm trying to get an actual proposition out of you for that system. So I'm asking, would you agree with the proposition, generally speaking, when we're not talking about any kind of extreme situation, when there are other options available, it is morally wrong to kill a human against their will, make them into a hamburger?
I would agree with that statement.
Okay, so then here's where we get to veganism. So if you're saying that in your moral system, it's wrong to do that to a human, but it's okay to do that to an animal, then implicit in what you're saying is that there's a difference between the two that justifies it for the one but not the other. So what is that difference? And if it were true of humans, would it justify making them into hamburgers?
Well, I think that if we're starting with like a principle like our definition of murder as only involving human beings, right? Then it's exclusive to everything that's non-human, right? So I don't think I need to appeal to a trait, or unless it's a trait that makes something human or makes something non-human, right?
Okay, so there's two problems there. So the first is just a semantic problem, which is that there are non-anthropocentric definitions of murder. And then the second point is that getting hung up on the word murder is just getting lost in semantics. We're really talking about the action of stabbing a being to death against their will and making them into a hamburger.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as long as it's non-human.
Yep, okay. So, and also just for the semantic point, obviously you concede that there are non-anthropocentric definitions of murder.
Yeah, I just don't. There are, but I don't have to accept them.
No, but you can't literally just categorically reject the use of the word murder. So you can say, I choose, and it's wrong to use the word murder.
Sorry, you cut out there at the very last second. So,
Um, you know what it partially is that I'm back in my house right now and I'm on the LTE, so I just need to switch it so it goes to Wi-Fi. Just give me 2 secs. I'll be right back. Still there?
yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so just the semantic point. You can choose to use whatever definition you want, but you can't actually tell a vegan that they are wrong to use the word murder.
Well, right. I mean, I think you have a concept of murder that differs from mine.
That's fine, but we're not going to get hung up on the semantics of the word. We'll talk about the actual action. But just as long as you concede that there's nothing wrong with a vegan using the word murder.
Yeah, worse is I can do a reductio, but I don't really think that applies in this case.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in the dictionary, it's fine to use that definition.
Yeah, but I'm on board with what you're saying.
Okay. And then the actual, like, that's just semantics, right? The core point is the action of stabbing a being to death and making them into a hamburger. So if you're saying that that is okay to do to animals, but wrong to do to humans, then implicit in what you're saying is that there's a difference between the two that justifies it for animals, but not for humans. So what is that difference?
Like I said, I don't think that you have to point to any particular trait unless it's a trait that makes something human or something that makes something else non-human, right? So it's like if you take...
Oh, wait, if you're doing that, you're saying the trait is humanity.
Yeah, like, yeah, so, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
whatever.
so yeah, well, first of all, you do have to specify a trait, because if you don't, if there isn't any trait, then one is reducible to the other. And at that point, you have a logical contradiction, because if one is reducible to the other while retaining moral value, then you can't state that the other doesn't have moral value. It would be making opposite statements about the same object. So there has to be some trait that's creating the moral value difference that stops them from being reducible to one another.
Okay.
So when you say it's humanity, then the situation we go to from there is, okay, so if we were to, for example, take your mind and transmit it into an artificial substrate, or into some like a machine substrate, artificial biological life form, something that doesn't qualify as human, would it now be okay to murder you for a hamburger?
Right. So what you're asking me essentially is what makes something human, right? You're asking me what I need you to point something out that makes something human, and then something what makes something non-human not human, right?
Pretty close to what I'm saying. That's basically it. But you could just leave it at the level of just, it is biologically a human. Just that thing has human DNA. Just the logical conclusion of that is you'd have to bite the bullet on killing, equally or more sentient beings that don't have human DNA or a human body.
Well,
so yeah, if you want to make a good position, you'd probably want to get more specific for sure about what exactly a human is.
I'm a substance dualist, so I don't think that what constitutes a human being is just merely biological facts.
Okay, so what is it about a human?
I think to be a human, you have to have a particular center of consciousness, and irreducible to chemistry or any biological fact, that has basically the criteria sufficient for personhood.
Okay, so when you say a particular center of consciousness, that's very vague. So what exactly do you mean? What makes a human? If it's about personhood, also it's not technically about humanity. So do you want to switch to personhood instead of humanity?
Well, I think that that's one of the essence of what a human being is, lies within the mind or the soul of the human being, right? And that sort of harmony between the body and the mind is what constitutes the human being.
Okay, but we can get the body part off of the table. If you're saying that it's something about the mental character of the being, then the body is not actually relevant, right? Because if we're going to say something to you like, hey, if we transmit your mind into something that's not biologically human, you're not going to say it's okay to murder you, are you?
Well, yeah, if you
we
just
put
take
your mom into machine substrate. Can we murder your mom if we transmit her consciousness?
Yeah, if you were to transmit that center of consciousness to a different, let's say a robot, right, or something even non-biological, then I think that there may be a moral issue there. Yes.
Yeah, well, just to be totally clear, it could be something biological also. It could be we create an artificial body that's actually, it's like a human body. It's actually greater in conscious experience than a human. Whatever aspect of consciousness you're going to say gives value, it's greater in this being.
Right, but I would say that whatever body is being used, the sort of instrument of the mind, is still valuable in virtue of it being used by the mind. But that's
yes,
fine. We can set that aside.
Well, yeah, but I want to get it fully off the table, not just set aside. Because what you're saying there, when you're acknowledging it's not anything specific about the body, it's really just, is there a mind there that meets my criterion for moral value? Then we can say the body is actually not the thing that's giving the value.
Yeah, I could. Well, it's complicated, but I think I would agree with you. I can go ahead and work with you there.
Well, if you disagree even slightly, you have to be able to push back on that. So, I mean, you explain to me, is it okay to kill you if we transmit your consciousness into a body that's not human?
Yeah, I would say it's intuitively. I would say no, it's not okay. But
well, not just intuitively. You like, if you think about it honestly, you're the exact same thing. You have your consciousness, you have your will to live, you're happy, you're going to see your friends later. You're just not in a human body. You're not. It's not okay to kill you. You're not going to say that's okay.
Yeah, but
can you just
when you say
concede
it's
that?
not okay, yeah, I don't think it would be. I wouldn't prefer that state of affairs if that's what you mean.
Yeah, by your system. Yeah. Okay. So good. So we got the body off the table. So when we're talking about the mind, what is it about the mind that gives a human this special value?
I think it's volition and a certain level of or capacity, a particular type of capacity to reason.
Okay, so what do you mean when you say volition? Just desires to do something?
Like will, right?
You don't think animals have a will?
Some, when I take, I'm a free will advocate, so I think that there are some animals that are completely determined, like the mosquito, for instance, right? I don't think has any sort of will. It operates more like a computer than it does a human being. So
let's start with cows, because we want to start with the case where it's the most clear. So let's start with the more sentient animals, and we can, if need be, work our way down.
Okay, well, I don't know if cows have minds in the same way, or not even in the same way, but period, um, like human beings do. I think that cows, it's plausible to believe that cows don't have this level of consciousness, right? That they are just active, right? I think that.
Yeah, but we're talking about wills, though, right?
Well,
Conscious.
Well, let's deal with first volition, and then let's deal with this like level of consciousness thing. So, I mean, when you're talking about volition, what do you mean? Just intentional states, like I am going to do this?
yeah, that's part of it. Also, I think that there has to be some sort of capacity to do otherwise.
Okay, well, that's where, yeah, I would say that you're arguing for magic because I don't believe in free will. But even if we like try to work around that, capacity to do otherwise, like the thing can reason on some level. I mean, is it really about volition? Because like a cow has a, volition to eat grass, or a dog has a volition to chase the mailman. Like, if you're going to talk about the level of consciousness, I mean, that should be the thing we talk about. Volition, it seems pretty hard to say that animals don't have any level of volition.
I agree that they may have wills, but the sort of volition that human beings have is a special one, especially when it comes to moral decisions. I think when it comes to moral decisions, human beings can do otherwise. Now, I don't think that they're all of our wills are free. All of our behaviors we freely chose to engage in, but I think that when it comes to important moral decisions, that we have the ability to do otherwise.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get specific with you, and I'll also just state that I really appreciate your attitude in this conversation because I think don't detect any dishonesty coming from you. So when you're talking about the animal, it's like I hear you saying things like volition and will and reasoning, and it's like I just want you to get specific. Like, what exactly is it that you're talking about that is only true of the human?
I think that human beings have a unique capability of being able to start causal chains that lead to behavior as opposed to being determined by antecedent factors. So let's take an example.
Okay, sorry, I just want to cut in to make sure I'm understanding. You're saying that the quality that gives a human value is free will. That's basically what you're saying.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's one of which, yes.
Okay, so that would be a consistent anti-vegan position if it is in fact the case that animals don't have free will and humans do have free will.
Right.
So you're basically on the hook to explain how a human is in some way that an animal is not free to do things. So like, for example, well, yeah, you'd have to demonstrate free will. If you're going to say that free will is the factor that's giving the humans moral value, you'd have to demonstrate, first of all, that humans have free will, and you would have to do this in a way that wouldn't simultaneously prove that animals have it.
Yeah, so I take free will to be coherent, right? So that's the first thing that I would need to demonstrate, and the first kind of level of conversation that we would have to have. Do you think free will is incoherent?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so how would you say that it's incoherent? First of all, we may have differing concepts or conceptions of free will. I want to make sure.
Are you talking about libertarian free will?
I think that a lot of our actions we could do otherwise, so yes. But I don't think libertarian free will necessarily needs to include something that we call the principle of alternate possibilities, right? So I think there's a mistake in a lot of in this dialectic where people necessarily think that an action done out of free will you necessarily could have done otherwise. I think that feature is there, but not in all of our actions.
Okay, well, I believe very strongly in this principle called falsifiability, right? So I think if you hold a position and you can't demonstrate, you can't spell out what the falsifiability condition is, it's safe to call it a dogma. You'd probably agree with that, right?
Well, the problem is that we're not at that level yet. We're talking about coherency, right? There's nothing incoherent about a unicorn, right? But there's no reason, there's no evidence. It's unfalsifiable if I were to say, oh, unicorns lived 100,000 years ago, they died, and now we have no evidence for them, but they did live. That's unfalsifiable. But the concept of a unicorn is coherent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, unicorn isn't like a contradiction or something. Like I understand the difference. Yeah, but
it makes no sense to talk about the evidence for an idea if you think the idea is incoherent.
Well, wait a second. I just want to get basic agreement from you on this. Okay, so if if you can't spell out what would persuade you that an idea is false, it's safe to call that idea a dogma. Surely. I mean, that doesn't seem like asking a lot.
Are you saying that I can't be reasoned with when it comes to this issue?
No, I have no idea. I haven't even talked to you about it. We haven't even
Oh,
gotten
okay.
into it yet. I'm just saying
I
as a starting.
misunderstood you there then.
No, no, no. Like I'm just asking in general. If someone says they believe something, and you keep trying to disprove it, and they won't accept anything, and you ask, "Can you tell me what would convince you this isn't true?" And there's nothing that they can say. You would agree at that point the idea is a dogma.
Oh, yes. I would say
Okay,
that
good.
person is, yeah, that's problematic on the rational basis, yes.
Totally. Okay. So basically, for me, with falsifiability and free will, the thing I would say is what would persuade me that I am wrong to think that free will is incoherent is if you could demonstrate to me how certain molecules are not part of the chain of causality.
Okay, first of all, like I said, I'm a substance dualist, right? So I'm not a physicalist, and I
I'm not
agree.
either.
You're not. You're okay. So do you think that there's only physical material in this world?
No.
Okay, that's interesting. So, um,
Do you want examples?
that's fine. I mean, I don't. You can
Like
offer some.
I can go really quick. Like examples would be you could talk about the Platonic realm, perfect spheres. You could talk about math and logic. I think those exist as like
So
coherent concepts in
you're a
some dimension.
Platonist of some sort, right? You believe in
Well, and
abstract
even
objects.
well, there's a bit more than that too. Well, I don't believe that. I don't know what it means to say they exist, but I wouldn't confidently say they don't exist. And then another thing, there's actually experiential things that aren't just like ideas that exist and that aren't physical. So consciousness, I am not persuaded that consciousness has a physical location. I don't think that it's made of material. I think it's a kind of like an epiphenomenon or some kind of some kind of thing that is produced at base
Like an
by
emergent, a non-material
exactly.
emergent. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So though I would, on the basis of like consciousness or perfect objects or anything like that, I would say I don't fit the definition of a physicalist.
Okay. So then I don't know why you're appealing to molecules then, because I think that these chains of action, right? These things that lead to behavior are caused by immaterial substance. So the
Okay.
way.
That's. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Well, that sounds like magic. When I'm saying that I'm not a physicalist, that doesn't mean that I think there's actually things that exist experientially, not just conceptually. So there's a difference between different non-physical things, right? Consciousness exists experientially, unless you're about to tell me you're a philosophical
Now,
zombie.
are we talking about
Um,
the coherency of free will? Because there are magical things that are coherent, right?
yeah, but well, we're talking about what would persuade me that it is coherent. So my current position is that it's not coherent, and I'm telling you that the falsifiability condition there
I
is
want to make
showing
sure
me.
we are on the same. I think I mean coherent. That's just for me. That means that it bears no internal contradiction. Maybe you're using it differently, and I just want to know.
No, I mean like logically coherent.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
like it's
where's
not
the
breaking
contradiction in what I said?
in the notion of free will.
Okay, and I explained my notion that and maybe I didn't do a very good job in making it clear, but I'll explain in as concise as possible. Basically, free will for me is an action that originates from the agent as opposed to anything outside external to the agent. Okay, that is so. If we take a behavior, let's say if I wrote a sentence down that behavior is an action of free will if it originates within the agent as opposed to something external to the agent. So that's free will for me. Now, where is the internal contradiction there?
The contradiction there would be if you agree that that all physical processes are produced by prior causes or randomness, some combination thereof, and that experiential non-physical things are the product at base of physical states.
Yes, but the problem is that I don't take the essence of an agent to be physical.
I don't know what you mean there. The thing that's producing their consciousness is physical. Like, do you think the
No,
consciousness would exist?
I don't
without a
believe
mind?
that.
Okay, well now you're in magic realm. You think consciousness would exist without a
That's
mind?
irrelevant. We're talking about coherency. Like I said, a unicorn is magic. A dragon is magical, right? A fireball is magical, but there's no incoherency.
Yeah, no. Sorry, to be clear, it's only incoherent or has a logical contradiction if you accept that experiential non-physical things are the product of physical processes, and that physical processes
Yeah, but I
are
don't
always the
accept
product
that.
of
So then you would admit if I
no,
don't
no, no.
accept that it's coherent.
It's possibly coherent. We'll
That's
get deeper
redundant.
into it though. Well, I'm just not totally sure. I need to
Coherency
poke
just
around
means
with.
possible.
How's this? I haven't currently found a way that it's not coherent, but I need to do more poking before I'm really convinced.
Okay.
So when we're talking about free will, when you're talking about like consciousness, basically. Okay, so just to be clear, I think that any immaterial thing which is experiential as opposed to just conceptual, right? So
Wait,
we can talk
I
about
stop? I
different.
need to ask a question. You've used this word experiential. Could you
That's what I'm
elaborate on
going to
that
say.
term? Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yeah. So when you're talking about non-physical things, for example, okay, there's things that are just conceptual, like ideas, like a unicorn, or you talk about logic or perfect objects. Those are concepts, right?
Yes, they are. They're abstract
Yeah.
objects, as we'd say. Concepts are abstract objects.
Sure. Okay. And then when you're talking about consciousness, that's not just a abstract object or a concept. That is an experience. Unless you're about to tell me you're a philosophical zombie.
Here's here. Let me lay this out for you. Okay. So there are two types of things in this world that I would see that at least in philosophy there are abstract concepts, and then there are concrete objects, right? Abstract
Sure.
objects don't engage in causal relations. Concrete do. Now there are two types of concrete material, or substances, I should say. There's physical and there's non-physical, right? So we would say God, right, is not an abstract object. He's not a mere proposition, but he is immaterial, and he engages in causal relations, so that he's not an abstract object. So he's non-physical, engages in concrete relations, so he's concrete, right? So that's something different than propositions, mathematical truths, and concepts, right?
Okay. Sorry. One second. Are you religious?
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
Oh, okay. I see what realm we're going down here. Okay. So, okay, this is going to enter some weird territory. Okay, so when we're talking about non-physical things that are experiential as opposed to conceptual, so they actually exist in some kind of not just as an idea, but as an experience. Like consciousness, you would agree, is an actual experience. You're actually experiencing reality right now. You're not a philosophical zombie, right?
Yeah, I'm still kind of I don't want to say put off, but confused what you mean by experiential and how that's relevant.
Is consciousness just a concept?
I think that consciousness is an immaterial. We do have experiences through our consciousness. I guess that's what I would say.
Okay, but surely you agree that there is a difference, even if both fit the overlapping kind of, or the overarching category of non-physical, you would agree that there are different categories of non-physical things, and that there's a difference between something that is a concept and something that is actually an experience.
Yeah, well, I think that experiences are only made possible through consciousness, ultimately, or minds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that minds are immaterial, but not abstract objects. As I said, they're concrete, immaterial objects, not abstract objects.
Okay, well, wait. Already there, if you're saying that there's immaterial objects that can be either abstract or concrete, that's very similar to what I'm saying. Like, I would say something that's immaterial and abstract would be like the concept of a unicorn, and something that's immaterial and concrete would be consciousness. Would you accept that?
Yeah, I'd be good with that.
Okay, all right. So I'm pretty much using the word experiential in a similar way as you're using the word concrete. But,
right. I think so. I think you should use that term. But
yeah. Well, I'm talking. The reason I use the word experiential is because it's actually like although experiences arise in consciousness, consciousness itself is an experience. I mean, it's you experiencing.
That seems problematic for me, and it's hard to flesh that out because I'm not saying that you're wrong. It's just a weird way of putting it. And I think that might. Because we would say experiences are made possible. Wait. One question. Yeah. I'm almost done. Would you say that experiences are possible because of consciousness?
Yes, but I would still say consciousness itself is an experience.
But when I say if experience is contingent upon consciousness, then they have to be distinct. So you couldn't agree with that. Think about here's an example. Do you think and maybe we have to get into what consciousness is, but like plants, right? Do plants experience?
I do not see any evidence that they do.
Right, but they might be conscious on some level if you take consciousness to mean to react with their environment, right? That they
That's not
respond
what
to.
I take conscious to mean.
Okay, what do you take consciousness to be?
Having subjective experience. So
Having
like if you look up
subjective
like the
experience.
definition of sentience or consciousness, you're talking about something that can experience subjectively. If it's like something to be that thing, it's like something to be Danny. It is not like something to be a rock.
Yeah, I think this is problematic. It's going to be hard for me to flesh it out, though. As to
Okay, well, here's what we'll do. I'll try to use your terms, your abstract and concrete immaterial objects, just because this isn't the thing I want to get hung up on. And unless some kind of confusion arises because of those terms, I think we can just go with those.
yeah, I think experiences are contingent upon having a mind or a consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that too. But again, I think consciousness is an experience. But whatever. Let's. That's not something that I think we need to get hung up on at this point. So, okay, and again, this is all ultimately under the frame of you're saying that the moral differentiating property between humans and animals is free will. And again, if you can in fact show that humans have free will, animals don't, then it would be a consistent place to oppose veganism from. So when you're talking about basically free will, what I would take to be the proof that free will is true would be if you could show that that some molecules somehow are not part of the chain of causation. So wait a sec, as I know you want to butt in the second I say that. When we're talking about consciousness, do you disagree that consciousness is a product at base of material things happening?
I disagree.
Okay, how can you prove that?
Well, I think that if you're saying that, I think that presupposes a sort of determinism where you're saying
no, I'm not a strict determinist.
Well, think about it. Then what you said that essentially you're asking me the question: is consciousness an emergent property of physical material? Right? Is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if physical material produces immaterial substance, okay, wouldn't it be determined by any facts or characteristics of that physical material?
It just depends if you include randomness at the quantum level in what you're saying when you say determinism. So when there might be a role for randomness. So I would see all things being produced by some combination of prior causes and randomness.
Okay, I don't. So let's get this straight. You asked me.
Here, let me explain. Someone who's a full determinist would say if you had full knowledge of the universe's starting conditions, you can picture how the whole thing would pan out. You wouldn't reject that, right?
Sorry, repeat that again.
If someone is a true hard determinist, ultimately their position means that if they knew all of the starting conditions for the universe, they would be able to predict everything that will happen throughout the course of its existence.
I don't know if that's true. Yeah,
well,
I'm sorry. Yeah, if the hard determinist. Yeah, that's for the perspective of the hard determinist. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Yeah, because I don't actually agree with that, but that's what hard determinism means. So I think I don't know what kind of I don't want to get into shit I don't know about, but there's I think terms in math for stuff like this, stuff like chaos theory. I don't really know, but the point is there are some things that might. Although they are still ultimately like physical processes, there might be some level of randomness involved. So it wouldn't actually be predictable from the initial conditions, but there's nothing spooky entering the picture. So people will talk at the quantum level about events that are just random. Something just appears in either one place or another. Now, I don't know enough about that to push back on that. So I just accept there might be some amount of things that happen randomly. So if I can't say that from knowing the starting conditions, you could tell everything that would happen in the universe from there, I can't call myself a hard determinist. But that doesn't mean I believe in free will, because I don't accept that as a dichotomy. I think that there's also probably a role for randomness.
Okay, so
I believe in some I believe in some combination of determinism and randomness.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we're talking about consciousness, and what we're kind of trying to get at right now is, if you're saying that consciousness is somehow not like you pushed back on, look, I asked you, how do you demonstrate that consciousness isn't the product of some kind of physical process at base? and you made reference to determinism, and I just cut in immediately and said I'm not a hard determinist. So that was the only relevance.
Right, but I just don't see how you can escape from that. For instance, do you think intentional states are part of the brain or a part of your consciousness?
I think they're part of consciousness, and I think that consciousness, every single aspect of your consciousness is produced at base by your brain.
For you, what causes intentional states?
Your brain.
Okay, so that means that that's a type of determinism, right? You see, I don't think intentional states come from the brain.
Could be a level,
no, listen to what you just said there. You said that your intentional states, that's to say, a particular state of your consciousness is caused by your brain, meaning that the behavior, right? The behavior, let's say, of writing a sentence down or doing your homework, can be traced not back to your consciousness, but to your brain. Right, so that's not what I accept. I think it makes more sense if you're a free will advocate that everything has to begin at the immaterial level, right? Because the immaterial level it's more plausible to think that the immaterial is not determined by the material.
Okay, so I think that at this point we just have to straight up make this into a free will debate, because if you're going to hinge your anti-veganism on free will existing, then, I mean, there's nothing else to talk about in the realm of veganism until we resolve this.
Well,
Would you agree with that?
I have other reasons. I mean, again, with the morality thing, I think that's one thing. I tried to debate it as secular as possible, because I understand we get in the weeds when it comes to my Christianity. But ultimately, for the Christian, right, what's good or what we should do might ultimately come from what God commands, right? And if God finds eating certain meats as permissible, then the Christian has no moral inconsistency there.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're going to say that the basis for moral value separation is God, then yeah, that would not be an inconsistent position. God says one being has value but not the others. That's my basis for valuing humans.
But I tried my
animals.
best to steer us away from that.
Yeah, because I would of course go down the road of okay, that's consistent, but it's based on a lie. Provide evidence for God. So we can either go there, we can go into the free will debate, or if you have another argument for separating animals and humans, why it's okay to make one into a burger but not the other, you can present that.
A third non-religious point, and I think that
one second. Sorry, it would be a third point, but it would be the second non-religious point. Two of your points are non-religious. One is religious.
Well, you said that free will is basically magic, right? And the
well,
same
wait,
that God is, right?
I wouldn't consider free will a religious thing necessarily. I mean, maybe for you it is, but you don't have to be religious to argue for free will. So I personally would not call that a religious point. Yeah, so I'm just saying. So far, I've heard you say. Like, I'm asking you for, we got good basic agreement at the start. An ethical system should exist. The ethical system should be consistent. And you believe that a human has a right not to be made into a burger. But you think it's okay to make an animal into a burger. So I ask you, what is it that separates them in value? Because they can't be reducible to one another while retaining, like the human can't be reducible to the animal while retaining value, or else you'd contradict yourself by saying the animal doesn't have value. So I've heard two pushbacks on that. I've heard morality from God, and I've heard free will, and now I'm hearing that you're going to put a third out there.
Well, actually, the third is an argument for you. I think that, you've heard of the term practical rationality, right?
No, I've heard the two terms on their own, though.
Okay, well, practical rationality involves a kind of moral act that is contingent upon a goal, okay? So,
sure.
You understand that if let's say you want to make an A in a class, right? That in accomplishing that goal, you ought to study for your test, right? And if you don't study for your test, you're being practically irrational in achieving that goal, right? Now,
sure.
I think to me, this is actually the most powerful secular argument for veganism, right? Now, I think a lot of people have the goal, whether they know it or not, to have a long lifespan or to be healthy, right? And I think that I personally think that meat is actually very unhealthy. Not only unhealthy, but like our bodies are not designed to digest a lot of meat. Now, that's part of where my theism is kind of there, where the idea of design. But setting that aside, I think it's very unhealthy to eat on a daily basis meat. So I think it's practically rational to be a vegan, especially if you're diagnosed with a heart condition. I'm just making sure you probably already familiar with that. Excuse me.
Yeah, I wouldn't push back on that, but just to be clear, that's not a something that you're using as an argument to separate animals from humans in terms of moral value. The only things you have on the table there so far are God and free will.
Right. But I'm just curious if you.
I agree with that argument. I don't think it's strong enough to necessarily push to like pure veganism, because there's some level of unhealthy things that's probably sustainable, or it depends on, if you say optimally long life or like just a certain level of long life. But yeah, no, if you have a goal of living an optimally long life, you probably ought not eat meat. I think that's like generally a pretty strong argument. But that's getting a bit into that's like a bit off of what we're talking about. So just right now, when we're talking about what is it that makes it okay to kill an animal for a burger but not a human, I've heard you say God gives morality only to humans, or moral value only to humans, and I've heard you say only humans have free will. So both of those are consistent anti-vegan positions. If it is in fact the case that God says this, or that free will exists and only for humans, then it would be a totally consistent thing to say, I give value to beings that either possess free will or that God has given morality to, and not to other beings, and then eat animals. I would say that's perfectly
consistent. Yeah, I wanted
consistent.
To make sure you understood a little nuance of the free will. I think free will, when it comes to obeying God's commands, so that I think humans have and that again, that involves theology, but I think there could be decisions that we have. In fact, there are decisions that we perform, or we behave in a particular way that is determined. I'm fine with that. But I think when it comes to moral decisions that humans, and that's to say, decisions that involve obeying God, we have the ability to do otherwise. So it's not that I'm a blanket free willist in the sense that every single thing that we do is
there is just some free will.
Yeah,
there's just some of
just
it.
Making sure that we understand. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Yeah, I'm just trying to lay out the ground. So yeah, either of those would be a consistent place to push back against veganism from. So at this point, the question for me is not the logical consistency of your anti-vegan position. It's now actually an empirical question of, can you actually prove this case that either God exists and furthermore that he has specific moral commandments? And then the other empirical question is, can you prove that free will exists but only for humans? So is there a third or any more arguments that you're going to put on the table to separate animals from humans in terms of moral value, or is that what we're dealing with?
I mean, the other one just reduces to pure subjectivism, right? Where someone could be consistent in saying, look, I just don't like eating human meat. That doesn't interest me, but I like eating beef, right? I think that
Yeah, if they're just saying, I do what I prefer,
yeah,
and they're fully willing to bite the bullet on any action so long as they prefer it, then it would be a consistent position. That would, of course, justify literally anything, because they can say they prefer anything.
Aren't you a subjectivist yourself?
I am, yeah.
So isn't that the view that you hold?
Well, I mean, I am a subjectivist, but that doesn't mean that I believe that we should build ethics. I'd like an ethical system, and I'd like that system to be consistent.
So you think, at least if there's any sort of ethical codes well, it seems like you're saying I'm a subjectivist, so ultimately things will be based on preferences, but I think we should, as a society or as groups of people, formulate this kind of social contract in which we have particular values, right? But
more or less, yeah.
Okay, but I just don't see how that's very compelling to the subjectivist that says, look, yeah, you can build your social fabric here on all these values and all these preferences, but I'm just not going to participate in it, and I'm willing to accept the consequences, right?
Yeah, what we do to those people is we just reduce them to absurdity. So it's not necessarily that you can show that person is inconsistent if they'll bite the bullet on this idea that if they prefer anything, it becomes ethical. But you just show, you just ask them questions like, okay, if you don't have any higher moral principles, even if you subjectively bootstrap those higher principles, if you don't have any higher principles, then your system would logically justify any action so long as you prefer it. And then you just start listing out those actions: raping your mom, committing a Holocaust, and when they bite the bullet on all of them,
view,
everyone...
Right? That, I mean, if everything...
No, I bootstrap higher principles than just preferences. So I
Higher,
mean, I
you
care.
mean universal principles? Not objective, but universal.
No, I think there are values that I hold above just my preferences in any given moment.
That
So it's
seems
like
to
I might
start creeping into moral realism.
no, because I would still say that those values are bootstrapped subjectively. I just think that they outweigh my preferences. I mean, if I have a preference to rape a child, I hold the rule that I ought not rape at a higher level than I hold the rule that I should just follow my preference in every instant.
But isn't that just a preference that if you take a principle like you ought not rape children, right? And I ask you, in virtue of what ought you not rape the child? You're going to have to provide your preference for the justification of that norm.
Yeah, no, I would treat those base ethical principles as just axioms. I would say they're not like I would bootstrap them out of my preferences, and I would say they override my
So
preferences
they're
in a local sense.
irrational.
What do you mean irrational?
So there's rational, irrational, and irrational. Okay, so presuppositions or axioms are irrational.
Yeah, sorry. With reason, against reason, or just totally devoid of reason.
Right.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying. Yeah. So no, I mean when I'm talking about my principles, like yes, they are bootstrapped out of just this is the world that I would like to create. I'd like to create a world where the value of not raping a child that means more than
Well,
whatever
that's not
my
irrational.
desire
You're
is.
justifying it through your preference, right? Let's say someone injected you with a serum that that at least gave you the disposition to want to rape children. Okay.
We were we were doing this to someone else earlier today. We were literally talking to
Okay.
someone about this, saying, yeah, what if your brain state changes? What if you have a tumor that makes you want to do things? No,
Right.
I mean
But
I
you
would say
wouldn't
that
hold.
there
Would you
are.
still hold to that? Now, keep in mind, the only thing that would change about you is that you would suddenly feel this kind of appetite for children, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
but would you still hold to that axiom? You think?
No, I would say that just my desires in kind of local sense don't outweigh the principle that you shouldn't rape kids. So if that became my
So
desire and I started
you
acting
would
on
still
it,
hold the axiom despite the whatever desires you may have.
yeah, I mean I would say that yeah the axiom is like more important to me.
So to me, you are a moral realist, and you believe in moral facts, right? You just think that
No,
because
no, I mean I think those facts reduce down to I prefer this.
wait, that's not what you just said. You said it was an axiom, which means it doesn't reduce down to anything. It's just a brute
Yeah, but
fact.
what's the axiom bootstrapped out of? It's bootstrapped out of
Nothing.
I want a world like
No,
this.
the axiom, remember, is irrational. There's no justification or reason for having an axiom, right? You assume that position to start with. So if you're
Oh,
saying,
okay. Well, it depends. It depends on the language you're using. In that sense, I wouldn't call it an axiom. Like I would ultimately say it's bootstrapped from my preference.
well, that's what I've been saying all along, but you said, no, it's higher than my preference. I heard you say that.
Well, yeah, no. I mean, I think you're getting confused because I have preferences. Like obviously, I have preferences, but with my preferences, I go, okay, these principles here, these outweigh any little like manifestation of my desires. Like I'll say I prefer to hold a principle like don't rape. If I suddenly want to rape, I don't think that rape just becomes ethical.
Now
So
you're
like the
okay. So
base.
let's start over because there might be confusion, but I don't think it's on my part. So let's say there is this fact that you ought not. Someone asked me in the chat to find moral realism, but I'll do that really fast. But moral realism is just the idea that actions and events have intrinsic properties of good and evil apart from minds. Okay, apart from preferences or minds or brains or whatever you want to call it. Okay, but anyways,
Which I don't believe. Yeah.
right, which you don't believe. But if you're thinking that something is axiomatic, you're establishing that it's true without any justification. Okay, so the law of identity, A equals A, is an axiom. You think that's true, but there's nothing to justify the law of identity. In the same way, you're saying that, and I think you went back on it, that's fine, that it was an axiom that we ought not to rape or eat children, right? That's
Well,
true,
yeah,
independent.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
no,
because
no,
and what specifically you said, what I asked is if you were to have a serum where you had all the shit, your desires shifted to want to rape children, you said that statement still is more carries more weight than your desire to have children or to want to eat children
Yeah,
or whatever.
like yeah, so when I back off the term axiom, it's just to try to work with the language that you're using so we don't get hung up on semantics. I mean,
Okay. There's an
yeah,
accepted definition of axiom, though. It's not a controversial one, but that's fine.
yeah, no, I mean, when I'm talking about a moral axiom, I'm just talking about like what the most base level rule is. If you want to say if there's anything like beneath it, like if it's bootstrapped out of something like preferences, it's not an axiom, then you can say preference is the axiom if you want to go there.
Okay, so that
But
goes back to way back when I said that if you're justifying your moral claims through your preferences, if that's what you hold to, a moral relativism, then the person, the non-vegan, it has just as much weight in their moral claims as you do.
I know, yeah, that's the reality.
Even if
unfortunately,
even if it comes now, with the absurd thing about that view is that it could even come down to this: that they could have a moral axiom saying you ought be inconsistent, right? Because inconsistent to them might play some sort of pragmatic role. So to me,
yeah, that's why
your view of
yeah.
this moral subjectivism is absurd in itself.
Well, no, that's why I started by asking you if you agree with the principle of consistency. When you came from Krill, I was assuming you were probably
I do, but you don't.
Well, I agree that ethics should be consistent, but that's my subjective
right.
preference.
But if
for
someone else, okay, but this
yeah, I
whole
can't tell them
axiom
there. I can't. One second. Okay, it's my turn for a minute here. So when you first came in, coming from Krill, I mean, my assumption, just because it's the general character of the server, is that you would be some kind of hardcore subjectard. So I obviously start by talking about just the kind of base things, like do we want a moral system? Do we want it to be consistent? And that's because I actually accept that someone can reject the principle of consistency. Someone can say, well, I don't want to be consistent. So all I point out is where that leads to, and then most people will reject the system. So no, there's not an objective way for me to, tell someone who wants to go cannibalize other people or rape children that they're wrong.
I'm not accusing you of that. I'm just saying that...
Of what? Sorry, you're not accusing me of what?
I'm not accusing you of, at least at this moment, of being a moral objectivist.
No, I'm not an objectivist.
Right, but I'm just saying that,
wait, come on, you got to
go ahead.
You went for quite a while there.
That's
so
fine.
yeah, okay, so yeah, when we're okay, and the other thing is, I want to just locate us globally before we continue. So when we're talking about this animal and human separation in terms of moral value, I've heard you put 3 arguments out there. So you've talked about God says only humans have moral value. You said only humans have free will, or at least only humans have some of their actions being caused by free will. And then you've put out a third one, which is saying, what are you saying? Someone can if I'm a subjectivist, then I'm open to someone just cutting against veganism by saying, I just don't hold that as a value, so I ought not do that.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you have any more arguments, or are we selecting between these 3? This is it right now.
Oh, you can choose. I mean, I hold a very weird type of the third one, but it's connected to the second one.
Yeah, no. All I'm doing is the core thing we're going to talk about is veganism, right? So what I'm trying to do is just lay out the terrain, and I'm seeing 3 kind of bases that you're going to try to use to argue against veganism. You've got the free will, you've got the God, and you've got the stuff about just subjectively holding different preferences.
Right. So we can talk about...
So I'm just asking. I'm asking if there's more pathways that you're going to use, or if those
I think those are the only 3 that I know of.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask, which do you want to focus in on? Because right now we're going down this one of talking about morality, subjective, objective, preferences, all that kind of stuff. Do you want to do that? Do you want to do free will, or do you want to do God?
I think that no matter which one we choose, it's going to devolve, or no, I wouldn't say devolve, but it's going to evolve into a theistic debate. And I don't know if you want to do that.
Oh, well, no. If one of... Okay, well then, you know what the smart thing to do is? We should not talk about God right away, and we should talk about either free will, or we should talk about the preferences, objecting to veganism from I have a different preference. And we should see if they reduce to God. And then if it all reduces down to 1, then we deal with that.
No, well, the problem, when I meant what I said, I think if we discuss free will, all I'm going
Because, Danny,
to do...
it sounded to me... Okay, sorry, I will let you say this, but it just sounded to me like you said that all of your arguments are going to reduce to an argument about God saying something.
I think so. I think so.
Okay, so well, one second here, because I love going down those philosophical pathways, but if you really do genuinely believe that, then the smart thing to do is probably to talk about the God question. So are
Yeah,
you telling me ultimately that your position on free will hinges on God?
I think so.
Okay, so that one's reduced out. So we're talking about God, and we're talking then about the preferences. And you're saying that this position on preferences, basically, how does that reduce down to being about God?
Well, I think that it's complicated, but I am a type of moral relativist. I think that um, it's like kind of like divine expressivism, which is the idea that everyone, I think, has the goal to be ultimately rational, and I think in virtue of that, they would obey what God has to say. So that's a type of divine moral relativism, right? I don't think I'm not a moral realist if moral realism means that things in and of themselves have moral properties. I don't think that. I think things only have properties, or at least moral properties, if if some agent gives them that property. For instance, if
Uh-huh.
I look at rape, right, and I
Yeah.
dislike it, that action of rape has the property of me disliking it, and I can say that that's what I call evil. But I don't think that the action of rape in and of itself has that property apart from my attitude, right?
Yeah, or God, and you're saying God's attitude is ultimately an attitude about rape. It's not just a fact about rape
Right.
that
So
rape
let's
is wrong.
say for the
Yeah.
rapist, he has an attitude towards the event as a good thing, right? Here, as him
Yeah.
liking it. I mean, right? Whereas,
Sorry to cut in,
go
Danny.
ahead.
I noticed you're using a lot of philosophical terminology. Are you a philosophy student, or what's your deal there?
Well, I do have a philosophy degree, but I mean, that's not.
What's your? No, I'm just asking. I'm just curious when I talk to people sometimes what their education level is. Like when you say
Yeah,
a
I only have a
philosophy degree, or
bachelor's, but I want to get my master's or something. I'm a teacher actually right now, but um,
okay, just curious. Sorry, continue.
yeah. So the idea is this: that for the rapist, he views the action of rape as good, and if we just say good is what some a particular subject, liking it. Sorry, that it bears the property of him liking it, right? But God
Yeah,
views it as he doesn't view it in a likable manner, right? So
sure.
then from our perspective, right, there's this kind of choice where we either can like the action or dislike the action, and I think that we could have reason to believe that we shouldn't like it in virtue of God disliking it. So it's a type of moral relativism, but it kind of operates or functions similarly to a moral as a more moral realism. I'll give you a better example. Think of
I actually understand
Okay, good.
fully what you're saying right now. We don't even need to get any more clarity on that. Yeah, you're saying actions don't have intrinsic properties. Beings have attitudes towards actions. You could have a different attitude than God, but God has a particular attitude, and we're probably best off valuing that.
Yes, exactly.
So, and when you say it's similar to objectivism, you're obviously just saying, well, God's preferences have been laid out for us in the Bible. We have a pretty clear idea of what he wants, so we can just, determine the rightness or wrongness of actions with respect to just God, basically. So it pretty
Yeah,
much
yeah, yeah,
gives you a whole objective framework on what's right and
yeah.
wrong.
But it's technically does not fit the
Yeah, because it's not inherent to the action. It's
exactly.
about what. Yeah, okay, I got you. That's fine. For me, I'm happy with that distinction. I don't get too bogged down in terminology. I care mostly about the ideas. I just worry about the terms insofar as they're necessary to discuss the ideas. Okay, so when we're talking, I just want to make sure because the free will one totally does reduce to God. If you're saying the proof of free will or
Well,
the reason we
can
have
I
free will
explain
is
why? Just very briefly. Won't take long.
sure. Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's the coherency of free will, which you don't need God to demonstrate, and then there's
Okay, I would push back on that depending on how you define it. But sorry, go on.
and then there's a second. What reason do we have to believe in free will as opposed to determinism? And um, and I think that requires God, because I think that if you're
Okay,
a
I got you.
physicalist, you actually probably have more reason to believe that hard determinism or some sort of determinism
Sure,
is
I would
more
agree.
plausible. So, but
Yep.
I think that you can demonstrate the coherency of free will without invoking any sort of theological
Okay.
truth.
Well, yeah, the coherency that basically depends for me. Like the area where I would point to a contradiction would be if you agreed that consciousness was actually contingent on physical processes, but then you said that beings can somehow make these like free decisions or something. But you ultimately
No, I wouldn't
don't
agree
think
to
that
that. I think that you could say something like this, that it's plausible to think that consciousness is an emergent property of physical matter, right? That might be plausible. But there's no internal contradiction to say that you have consciousness that uses the instrument of the body or the brain to act, right? That's different. Now, both are coherent.
Sorry,
One second.
I just am not going to follow, so I need to make sure I'm understanding
Yeah.
what you're saying. Just to be totally clear, consciousness, do you agree that it's the product of physical events? Like
I do
it breaks,
not.
it's all okay. So in that case, I wouldn't necessarily. It could be that there's a contradiction that we'll find, but I wouldn't say it's contradictory in the way I would tell like a libertarian free will person that they're contradictory, because the contradiction would be saying consciousness is fully the product of physical matter, and then saying that agents can do things that are somehow the cause of that action is not reducible to physical matter. That would be the contradiction. But you don't actually hold the former premise, so I wouldn't say that you have a contradiction there.
Okay. Yeah, I think for the dualist, the best...
Do you follow what I just said?
Yes, I did. I think that you're... I mean, I did, but let's see if I can regurgitate it. I think I dismissed it too fast, though. But
you want me to say it again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
I just don't think that it was relevant to what I was saying. That's all.
No, it's not super relevant because you don't actually believe it. But the whole thing was earlier there was this contention of, am I saying your position on free will is contradictory? And when I generally
okay, now I understand. You would say to the free will.
Saying,
1 second. You would say that look, Mr. Free Will advocate. Do you accept this kind of presupposition or this fact? And then if they say yes, then they do have a contradictory position, right? I think that's
to be
what you were
totally
saying.
clear, basically, but just to lay out what that fact is, so we're totally clear and we're totally clear on what the contradiction is. If they believe that consciousness is wholly the product of physical processes, then they can't say that actions, that intentional states or anything the being's doing or that's happening in their consciousness is somehow free or determined by the being, because then they're saying it's not just determined by some kind of physical process, it's determined by something else. So the contradiction is only if you buy the premise that consciousness or is fully the product of
I don't see a contradiction there. I think that
the contradiction would be consciousness is fully the product of physical reality.
No, I think this is what you should say.
Wait, 1 second,
okay.
1 second, please. The contradiction, to literally break it down to a statement, would be consciousness is and isn't fully the product of physical reality.
I see. I think you should phrase it this way. I think you would say, you would ask the free will advocate, do intentional states come from brain states? And if they say yes, then they're in the pickle, right? But if you're saying something like brains create consciousness, that it doesn't follow that therefore brains determine what consciousness does, right?
It depends what you mean there. I'm trying to be careful not to fall down massive rabbit holes we don't need to go down.
I don't think this is a rabbit hole. If I could re-explain in a more simple way, but you can talk.
It just depends if they're going to say the brain is just some physical process that's happening.
Okay, here's what I'm saying. A creates B. Now, just in virtue of the fact that A created B, does B determined by A? No, not prima facie.
Yeah, it's not.
Now, if A causes B to act, right, or causes B to have some sort of feature to where it causes actions, right, then the free will... Go ahead.
The statement would be, everything about consciousness is produced by some kind of physical process. Right?
Okay, causes. That's different than create.
Okay, well, let's not get hung up on the language. Just every moment of consciousness, everything happening in consciousness is produced by some kind of, at base, physical process, the movement of molecules and stuff like this.
I think that then you would get them in a contradiction.
Yes, correct. Because if they agree to that, then they can't say that there is some like non-physical cause behind consciousness. That would be saying consciousness is and isn't the product, fully the product of physical things happening.
Right. I think that if you were debating someone that was trying to argue for free will and they conceded that, then you would
Yeah.
you would corner them into contradiction.
Yes, and I've acknowledged that you have actually not conceded that, so I wouldn't say that your position currently that I've found a contradiction in. Okay, so let's zoom back out here. So free will, we're talking about if that is in fact fully reducible to the existence of God. So you talked about two things: it's whether it's an empirical fact and whether it's a coherent concept. So I'm willing to say just for now that its coherence, coherence is not dependent on a belief in God. You could just believe that it's somehow immaterially caused or some shit like that, and then you're not stuck in that trap I'm talking about there. But you're saying that its actual empirical existence that hinges on God.
I think that the reasons to believe that that's the case would be contingent upon God. Yes, I think that if it apart from God, you'd have more reason to believe in determinism.
Yeah, okay, all right. So if the free will point is, if you're going to say that the actual reason to believe that free will is not just coherent but is a fact about reality hinges on God, then I would definitely say the free will point is reducible to the God point, and we don't need to argue the free will point.
As long as you don't, I mean, I'm actually happy if you don't think that free will is incoherent, because we could be living in a world in which that's the case.
Well, it's incoherent only if it, like, when I say it's incoherent, it's because most people who argue for free will, well, I don't know if I should say most. It's incoherent if it contains the contradiction that I was just pointing out.
Yeah, but I'm not. That doesn't matter anymore. I'm just saying that you can conceive of a concept of free will, right? That's
okay. Just give me just in like one sentence, just coherent description of free will. Okay. Doesn't have to be proven. Just something that's not contradictory.
It's a chain of actions that lead to a behavior that is caused by the agent itself, instead of anything external to the agent, right? So that's my definition of free will.
Yeah, okay, so that sentence there is conceptually coherent. I don't think that there is a coherent way to map that onto reality, but that's a separate question.
Okay, so you're equivocating on coherence there, right?
No, I'm saying that the concept itself, when you just say, free will is just it's just an action being done by a being, and the cause of that action is not reducible to physical reality. I mean, I don't know what.
Well, it's possible to say that immaterial, the mind could be caused by some other physical fact, right? Some physical phenomena. Sorry, not anomaly.
The contradiction comes up if you say it's fully caused by what's physical, and then try to say that it's not.
I'm just saying that you can, just because it involves immaterial, like an immaterial mind, doesn't necessarily mean that there's free will, right? There are a lot of
no, of course not. Yeah, because in my view, for example,
right?
Well, one sec. Like in my view, for example, I would say the mind is immaterial, but I would say that the mind is fully produced by things that are material and that are determined or random.
Now I have a question. Why do you think that?
There's not evidence to the contrary.
Well, that's not but that's not meeting your burden of proof.
What do you mean?
Okay, when I'm if the claim is that consciousness is an emergent property of physical objects, and then I ask you, okay, support that claim, you're saying there's no evidence to say that it's
sorry, no, I'm not appealing to ignorance. No, what the evidence for that would basically just be that when you mess with the brain, it messes with your perception. It seems pretty clear that our brain is actually, like, we can do tons of experiments and poke into it and do things, and it'll affect how we perceive.
I would disagree with you there, even as a free will advocate. Think about this, right? Your perception is not your consciousness. Here's the best analogy. Think of an instrument like a piano, right? And the piano being the body, or more specifically the brain, right? Now, the mind, the consciousness is what we're saying, that plays the instrument, utilizes the instrument to produce sound and to make things work, to entertain, whatever, basically uses the instrument for some end, right? And that can, the end being like a behavior for translating the analogy.
Sorry, I'm already problem with that, though, which is that the mind is occurring slightly after the physical process in the brain.
The mind?
Yeah, so like when they do things like they test, when do you feel this impulse, and you can touch someone at two different places on their body, both of which have a further chain of nerves to actually like reach the brain, and they feel like they're happening at the same time. It's like you can literally tell those things are not happening at the same time, but your brain is doing little intervals, and everything happening in the interval feels to you that it's happening at the same time. They can do experiments with stuff like, okay, push the red or the green button, and right before you actually make the choice, they can tell from your brain which choice you're going to make. So the actual conscious experience is actually happening after the physical brain state, just slightly. So
no, I'm unfamiliar with that study, and I think that there are. I read other studies
I'll be honest, I don't want to push hard into that stuff because that's entering scientific territory I don't know a whole lot about. But I'm currently pretty persuaded of the position that you can't use the piano player analogy like that, because I think that it's the piano playing the player.
Yeah, that seems. That's funny, is because I've read scientific research that says the exact opposite of what you said, but I wouldn't be able to produce that right now at this given moment, but I'd be willing to talk about it later. I don't think it's healthy to dwell on that if we're both kind of like icky on the research, and I don't mean icky in the sense that like.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, and I'm kind of starting to think the whole free will thing. I mean, it's interesting to talk about, but if it reduces to the God thing, if we're just going to get into it, and it's ultimately going to be like, not just when we're talking about coherence, but when we're talking about its empirical reality. If you're going to say proving that hinges on a belief in God, then it's like we may as well just talk about God.
Right, and I don't know if you're willing to do that.
Of course I am. I was just trying to get
at this
like
moment.
Yeah, of course I am. I was just trying to agree with you on as many things as possible. So when you're talking about, you said there's two things about free will. You said there's the coherence,
and there's the plausibility. Okay, that's the reasons to believe. Okay, and I think that the plausibility comes from basically the reasons God. As to why. Yeah, God. Right. I think that, for instance, there are verses in the Bible that talk about if you're tempted, right, then God's going to provide a way to where you can resist the temptation. That's to say that every time you've actually sinned, that you could have done otherwise, which means that you're not determined externally. In those cases, and there are other illusions. And I mean,
yeah.
But
okay, sorry, Danny, I just got it. Let's just one thing here. So I understand you're saying the possibility, or what I would say the empirical reality of whether it's actually true that free will exists. If you're saying that hinges on God, then that aspect reduces to God. And then just talking about the conceptual coherence.
No, you're saying empirical in a different. I don't know what you mean by empirical.
I'm just whether it's a fact about reality,
okay.
whether it's a true fact about reality.
Okay.
So whether it's a fact that hinges on God, and whether it's coherent, you say that you don't have to rely on any religious reasoning for that. And I'm just saying, from what you've currently put on the table, I wouldn't say it's incoherent. When you say free will is just a mind choosing to do something, and the source of that choice is something that doesn't just reduce down to physical matter.
Yeah.
That concept on its own, just from what I've heard there, is not incoherent. Now, when we talk about how something is caused by non-physical matter, it could be that we find contradictions there, but I wouldn't say at just the level of granularity you're at right now that I see a contradiction in that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then if the other point reduces to God, then that we should just talk about God. So just now, again, I'm sure you already remember this, but in case we're losing track, this is all happening in the context of how are we going to say that humans have a sufficient moral value that it's wrong to make them into a hamburger, and say the opposite for animals. So originally there was three bases for separating them in terms of moral value. There was free will, there was God, and then this other thing about preferences, basically. So the free will thing reduces to the God thing. So now we've got two arguments on the table.
Very quickly, I think that there are people like Philip Roth and other libertarian free will advocates that are atheist, right? And I don't know what they would say in terms of the plausibility of free will, but you could be I just want, for the room's sake, you can be a free will advocate and not be a Christian or a theist, right? But that's my reasoning as to why I hold the concept.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
no. To make sure.
Yeah, of course. When I'm saying reduces that. The empirical truth of it, or whether it's a fact that reduces down to God, I'm saying within your worldview. I'm not saying that the only people who try to make arguments that free will is true are doing so on the basis of religion. I'm saying you are.
Yeah, I just wanted. It was for the sake of the room.
No, that's worth saying. That's fine. Okay, and then okay, so the two things we have now are this thing about preferences and this thing about God. And the preference one, I'll just concede to you on. So yeah, you can oppose veganism consistently from just saying I don't share the preference of whatever it is, maximizing well-being, valuing sentient beings, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I fully concede you can oppose veganism from there. Generally speaking, when I'm talking to those people, I just point out the logical conclusions of their system, and that's enough to back most people off of their view. Like, for example, there was a guy in here earlier today saying he would do, whatever is of benefit to him or something like this. And it's like, okay, well, if it's, you have some brain alteration, kind of like what you were trying to do to me a little while ago. If you have some brain alteration and suddenly it's of benefit to you to like just rape your family or some shit like this, would you accept it? And he said yes. So that's not a logically incoherent position. It's still following the laws of logic, but it's producing a conclusion that is greatly at odds with the moral principles that virtually everyone holds. So when I'm talking to one of those, moral oughts are a result of a goal and a means to achieve that goal. If you have the goal of getting a good score on a test, you ought to study, etc. When I'm talking to a subjectivist like that, and they're arguing against veganism, it just comes down to me pointing out the conclusions of their worldview, and that'll push most people off their view, even if not them specifically.
Right.
But I would concede the point to you that you can coherently oppose veganism from there if you want to. But you don't even personally do that, so that's actually not even that relevant.
Well,
when I'm
I
talking
told
to
you my version of moral relativism, but I don't know if you forgot about that. But
no, of course
okay,
I remember. You're saying that it's not the action itself that has an intrinsic moral value. You're saying beings have preferences about what is right and wrong, and God is one of those beings, and we are probably best off aligning our preferences with him.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I follow what you're saying. But yeah, point being, I concede that you can consistently oppose veganism from a point of just saying I have a preference that is going to cut against that, and then biting the bullet on whatever consequences that preference has. But that's not actually really what you're personally doing here. I mean, well, if you are, it's just saying, it's your reason for holding the preference is going to reduce down to God, right?
Not always. Sometimes I think that obviously I do things that I.
Sorry, Danny. Let me make clear. The reason that you don't hold a position that it's actually a wrong preference to hold is because God hasn't explicitly said so.
Yeah, that there. That's fine.
Okay, so that in my view, that would reduce down to God. So what we should be talking about here, unless you're going to oppose me on that reducing down to God for you.
That's fine. We can just leave it at that.
Okay, so we've got to talk about whether God exists, basically, because all of your arguments for separating animals and humans in terms of moral value reduce down to God.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so yeah, and you said so yourself a while ago. I just wanted to actually make sure that was the case before we went to God. But yeah, you're totally right. If it's to God, then we need to talk about whether God exists. So you are the one making the positive claim here. I'm sure you agree. I'm not claiming God doesn't exist. I'm claiming there's no evidence for God. So do you agree with that? And if so, you probably would agree you have the burden of proof, right?
Unfortunately, we're going to be getting into a conversation that really we have to make sure we're using the same terms. I know you're not a very big buff on semantics, but if what you mean by evidence, I just take two types of justification, right? There's the evidence in the sense of like things that are justified through the scientific method and maybe through sensory perception. And there's the different types of justification, which is kind of like the deductive reasoning, which you can develop or justify claims based on the meanings of words, right? And I think that there is a hybrid here, for at least for my belief in God. I don't know if you're prepared to debate the Kalam cosmological argument, but that's one of the.
Yeah, I'm prepared to debate whatever your argument for God is.
Well, I think that I think it's plausible to believe that the universe had a beginning, right? And I think that it's also plausible to believe that when you witness beginnings, that they have causes. Okay, now, if the universe had a beginning, right, then it's reasonable to think that it had a cause. Now, what we know about this cause is that it has to be non-physical, right? Because if the universe began, and if all the universe means is that everything in physical existence, that then whatever was before the universe, right, had to be non-physical, okay? And also, whatever was before the universe had to be extremely powerful, right? Consider the amount of energy that was required for the expansion of the universe. Let's say, okay, and I think that those two lead credence to, at best, a sort of deistic mechanism, or God, right? And lay a sort of foundation to where we might look around the world to see whether this God has revealed himself. And then I go on from there. But I just didn't know whether you disagree or agree with what I just said.
No, okay, we're gonna need to crack into that in detail. There's just one thing that's tripping me out that is totally unrelated to this, which is just JHC right now. Sorry, is Puffin in here right now?
Well,
yeah,
JHC and I are good friends.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, because I'm wondering why he's not in this server anymore. It's tripping me out.
He's camping right now.
Yeah, but what server is that he's in there? Chill chat.
That's Realism.
Well,
yeah, okay.
we JHC and I like play League of Legends and stuff, and
Aren't you still on that server, Isaac? You should just be able to look in the.
well, he's camping
chat
right now.
thing
You're not
to
going to
see
find
him.
him.
Well, yeah,
he's connected to the call right now, though. Oh wait, is he still connected? Yeah, he's still connected to the call.
I'm wondering because he dipped out of here randomly, but I always had good conversations with that guy, so I'm kind of curious what the fuck happened to him exactly.
Maybe he got a new account or something. I'm not sure.
No, I mean it's the same account. I just don't know what's up. I'm
It is?
assuming it's because so many people are trying to drag him into stupid debates between me and the Philo server, but I don't want him to feel like he can't be in here.
Well,
So,
JC
Danny,
and I are going to debate on the resurrection this summer, if you're interested.
I absolutely am.
But I don't know when. Probably in July. He has a PhD in philosophy,
Yeah.
as well as he was an ex-Christian, so he has enormous knowledge, and he has pretty impeccable lines of reasoning. So I hope to learn from that debate. But yes, I'm aware of JHC and his positions.
Okay, yeah. Well, I haven't been able to get a hold of that guy for so fucking long that I almost just am thinking I might boot over to that server for 2 minutes and then come back and talk Kalam with you. I just want to.
Right
I think
now,
he took
is
a
he?
break
Oh.
from Discord for a while, but I don't know about anymore. Like
Oh,
now.
he is
But
there.
yeah, he's
That's
not on this
interesting.
server anymore.
Okay,
Yeah, I
yeah.
told you.
Yeah. Well, Danny, why? In fact, you're probably on better terms with the guy than me. Ask him to pop in here. Do you mind? If you mind, I will.
I do mind. I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
But
Okay, I'm gonna come back because I really like that guy. And I don't know why he dipped out of here, so I'll be back in like a minute or two.
okay.
Once I started researching more, like for example, there's like theories of schizophrenia that posit that schizophrenia is a disorder based on hyperdomestication, and they have physical differences as well, like even palate size, which like in other species, the palate size shrinks when we select for more social species. And then like the evolutionary theories of schizophrenia basically say that
magic race will never know.
Yeah, is anybody listening to Quirky? Anybody?
Oh man.
Anybody?
Asking
Speak up.
is back, but cancel this bullshit. Was good to ask. Have you ever?
Oh, I cut when you left. They were like, "Oh my god!"
Everyone just loves JC.
That poor guy. Yeah, JC's he's hot. That's true.
He's definitely in my top 5.
So, Ratson, are you like, would you be willing to swing to the other side of the aisle for JC?
Who?
You mean
JC.
sexually? No.
Yeah. No?
Yeah, I was typing.
He's back. Hey, Danny.
Hey.
I just have a question.
Okay.
Danny.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to talk to that guy, so I just booted over there and told him to message me, to which he said, okay. Okay, yeah, so Danny, let's hear, what's your argument for God, if you just had to state it quickly?
Oh, okay. I would first say that there are two different types of warrant for beliefs, right? I think that there's rational warrant, in the sort of philosophical sense, and there's experiential warrant. I'm not going to provide the experiential warrant. I don't think that's very interesting in terms of persuasion, or even if I couldn't even say it's a rational one. But as far as the rational warrant, I think that the Kalam is convincing to me. And I briefly explained it, but let me try to go as fast as possible. The idea is that it's plausible to believe that the universe had a beginning. And if we define the universe as everything that's physical, all physical material, and if all physical material had a beginning, and if it's reasonable to think that for every beginning you have a cause, then you might say that all physical matter had a cause, but this cause can't be physical material. It's immaterial, right? And not only is it immaterial, like an abstract object, it has to be concrete, because abstract objects like ideas, propositions, mathematical truths are not are causally inert. Okay, so it has to be immaterial, the cause. Now, or it doesn't have to, but it's plausible to think. Then you have the fact that the universe is expanding, right? It requires a lot of energy to do so. So whatever caused the universe had the capacity for expanding the universe at this rate with so much matter. So it had to be very powerful. Okay, and then there's a third one, which I'm not prepared to. I don't pretend to understand this part, but it's the idea that. Well, actually, I'm not going to espouse it because I wouldn't be able to support it. So that's fine. But I think that...
Okay, so I've heard first-hand experience and the Kalam argument.
Yes. Well, that's one reason, right? And I think that also I'm an ID theorist to some extent. I think that when you look at instructions or code, then I think it's...
I know this one, yeah.
Okay. And I think that those are some of the reasons that I hold... that I think that the belief in God is rationally warranted.
Okay, I think the best thing to do is kind of like we did with veganism. Like, when I'm talking to people who are philosophically illiterate, I don't let them shotgun me because they just want to throw a million things on the table. But if I'm talking to someone who can do philosophy, it's like I'm fine just getting all their arguments out, and we can kind of go them one by one, see if any are reducible to any others. So let's get them all out there. So I've heard the Kalam argument, I've heard the first-hand experience argument, and then I've heard
that's
the
all. Actually,
idea
I'm
argument.
prepared to. Yeah, that's all I'm prepared to defend. Now, as far as
you're making me curious, though, Danny. What's the other one?
Oh well, there are other arguments that I find interesting, but I wouldn't be able to support. Like, for instance, the ontological argument. I think it works, but I could be convinced otherwise. I think it's kind of a cheap way to get rational warrant on the belief in God, but I think it is still very interesting to me. As far as I do find Plantinga's evolutionary problem, I forgot what it was called, but the idea that evolution doesn't select for true beliefs, so you have reason to doubt all your perception, right? Evolution only selects traits that allow you to survive, and there's no argument to demonstrate that traits that survive or would give you true beliefs. They could just as well give you false beliefs, but at least the false beliefs would be aimed at survival. So I think there's a problem there for the atheist.
The evolutionary argument is naturalism.
So just to be clear, so I want to just make sure we have them all on the table. So there's a Kalam argument, there's the first-hand experience argument, there's the intelligent design argument, and then I'm not fully tracking what you're saying about evolution right there.
Okay, so we want to say that we can rely on our beliefs being true. Okay, and we would say if you're as an evolutionist, right, we would say that you have attained these beliefs, right, through the process of and the mechanisms of evolution, right? So it seems, so I feel like there's something that's overlooked, right? A lot of evolutionists want to say that traits are selected for. That traits are selected in such a way would we come to true beliefs, but I don't think there's any evidence, or sorry, any good argument for that, because I think that evolution doesn't gear towards true beliefs, but rather any beliefs that allow for survival. So you could potentially have all the false beliefs in the world, right? It's possible, but they're at least aimed at survival, right? So evolution doesn't push you towards true or false beliefs, just beliefs that allow for survival. So why would you trust what what you think? So that
Okay, other than those four, the Kalam, first-hand experience, ID, and evolution doesn't program for truth necessarily. Is there anything else, or are those?
I like the ontological argument, but I can be convinced otherwise. But I'm really open.
What's that one again? Let me remember the ontological. That's God has to be like the greatest being ever, and the greatest being ever would be greater if he existed.
That God is basically necessary based on his greatness. That's essentially.
Okay, so I'll just rip through all five, and then you can push back. So when you're talking Kalam argument, that's just an equivocation on what cause means, right? So the fact that physical events are produced by causes doesn't mean they're produced by immaterial mystic beings. When you're talking about first-hand experience, that's an anecdote. You can't actually provide any evidence to me that's going to comport necessarily with logic to convince me of that I can tell for myself. That's just you asserting something. When you're talking about intelligent design, that's a non sequitur. There's nothing about a design that actually implies that it has to have been designed by a conscious mind. When you're talking about evolution doesn't program for true beliefs, that cuts against your beliefs as much as mine. And then what was the final one? The final one was ontological. Oh yeah, nothing about the fact that God's greatness actually demonstrates that God is true. The fact that he would be greater if he existed doesn't actually mean he exists. So that would be my bullet point rebut of all of those.
Okay, so with the Kalam, you're saying I'm equivocating on cause. I don't.
Well, and to be clear, just so you know exactly what I mean when I say that, because I don't like to throw out, equivocate, red herring, or something like this, and not specify exactly what I'm talking about. So when I'm saying you're equivocating, I'm saying when you say everything is produced by a cause, all we know when we mean that is some kind of material process or something happening, or you don't actually know that the cause is some kind of mystic being. So it's when you start going there.
But I never claimed that.
Okay, so you're not claiming that first cause has to be God.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so how's that an argument for God?
Well, I'm claiming that it must be immaterial, or it's plausible to think it's immaterial. And I'm also claiming that it has to be powerful, which gives you reason to believe. And then William Lane Craig argues that it has to be personal. I'm not prepared to flesh that out. But
yeah, so powerful I'd agree with. I mean, presumably, unless it turns out in physics that it can be caused by some tiny little spark or something. I don't fucking know, but sure, it could be powerful.
Right.
And immaterial, I mean, I don't know. It's that could be the case or not, but I don't see how powerful or immaterial actually would demonstrate God.
Well, I think something that's if something caused. First of all, let's deal with what the universe means. All we mean by the universe is everything that's physical, right? If there was a point in which there was non-physical material, there was a point in which physical material began to exist, okay, then everything causally or logically prior to that would be non-physical.
I mean, you're entering the realm of physics. I don't fucking know. I literally am just not sure if there was something physical before the universe or not.
Well, do you think it's plausible to think the universe began to exist?
I think it's possible that the universe came from something non-physical.
There's plausibility and possibility.
I do not know enough about physics to actually have an opinion.
Well, then it's not worth talking about then. I'm not saying, I mean, it's just
Do you? I thought you were a philosophy student.
No, but I mean, I can't have a dialectic with you because you're just saying I don't know.
Well, yeah, but I thought were saying that it comes from God.
No, what I'm saying is this, that if physical material, there was a point in which physical material began, then everything that could have caused that point to happen has to be immaterial.
I don't know if that's the case. If
you're saying I don't know, so how can we have the conversation?
Well, I don't know how you know either. I mean, it's possible it was immaterial.
Right?
Well, how about this, Danny? It's possible it was material. It's possible it was immaterial. Either way, choose whichever pathway you want. How does that demonstrate God?
Okay, because God is immaterial, that whatever substance led to the existence of the universe had to be immaterial. Right?
Wait,
and that's already an attribute of God.
Let's say, sake of argument, I bite the bullet on it's immaterial. Now, I don't personally know if it was immaterial or not. I have no clue. But let's just say that I accepted that. The fact that it's immaterial, I mean, unless you think that the whole category of immaterial things are just God, then it's possible it's something immaterial that's not God.
Think of it this way:
well, wait. Before you push back, I do want a concession there. Are all immaterial things God?
No.
No.
So the fact that's one second. So the fact that something had a immaterial cause, if that is in fact the case, that wouldn't actually demonstrate that that immaterial cause was God.
Not necessarily. You're correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
But
and then.
But
sorry, go ahead.
But the thing is that my question is, does it raise the probability?
Raise the probability. I mean, if you're gonna say God is immaterial, the thing was immaterial, so now there's a higher chance of it being God than it was before. I mean, I guess you could say so.
Right?
But that's not actually, that doesn't cross the threshold into being any kind of like proof of God.
I agree with you. Right? Remember when we're doing science, right? It's not if you let's say you're in the kitchen, you have a drink, right? And then you turn around, the drink spills, you see a cat, you see a 3-year-old running around. You can't prove what caused the cup to fall down, right? You're going to try to come up with the best explanation, okay? And if you know that there's, let's say, cat hair on the counter, that gives you reason to believe, right? But it doesn't prove that the cat might have caused it, as opposed to the 3-year-old, right? So I'm just saying that we've already identified one of the attributes of God as whatever occurred causally prior to the existence of the universe.
I would say that if that shifts the probability, it's in a microscopic level, because there's basically like an infinite amount of material and immaterial things, and God is just one of them. So it's like if you shifted it from infinity to infinity minus one, that's not like a strong.
But there are two types of immaterial things, right? Okay, there are abstract objects that are immaterial, and there's concrete objects. Concrete immaterial objects, okay? And the only concrete immaterial object that I can think of that can engage in causal relations are minds and souls.
Danny, you know what honestly comes to my mind when I hear you talking about this? You seem like a smart dude. You seem like you know about philosophy. You seem to me like you are stepping way out of your area of knowledge right now and talking about physics.
What's the argument for that?
Well, I'm just going to ask, do you actually like know something about physics here, or like how are you getting to this? Is it the consensus?
Well, I'm familiar with Penrose's and Hawking's formulation of a singularity, right? And I think that
okay. Well, the important point. Wait,
are you actually interested? Because I feel like this is. If you were interested, you would have let me finish.
Well, I'm not prepared to debate physics, but I was just giving more of a statement right there that I just think. When you start entering that realm of talking about what was the universe prior to the Big Bang, it's like, is that actually something that you know about, or are you just making assumptions?
Well, first of all,
this has nothing to do with physics. So
right. There's that, but I think he was talking about the premise. That the universe began.
One second. What do you mean, JoVonn? Are you a Christian? What's your deal?
No, I'm an agnostic, but it has nothing to do with physics in of itself. This is just purely.
Wait, sorry. If it's not physics, what domain of thinking would deal with what caused the universe?
This is gonna be philosophy.
You don't think that physics would be talking about what created physical reality?
This isn't. We're not trying to use science in this. This isn't about science.
It seems to me like the things he's saying right now are pretty fucking contingent on science.
We're using the meanings of the words. It's kind of like a deductive approach where, listen, if we define universe to be all physical material, okay? And if we define, if we know that, if it's plausible to believe that the universe began to exist, that means that anything causally prior to the universe is immaterial. That's not. That's using.
I think that's a non. I think that's a non sequitur.
Well, go ahead and
How are you
demonstrate it.
getting there? Well, you're saying that because this physical matter that we have right now, it came into existence at a certain point, that it's impossible that there is anything physical existing before that point. It's like stating it can't be any kind of rearrangement that happened. It has to be created from the
Let me
ether.
try to make this easier. If universe, we're not going to use the word universe anymore. Let's just use physical, all physical material.
Okay, Danny, here, let me ask you like this. How do you know, like, again, I don't have a position because I'm not a physicist. I have no fucking idea about what our theories are about what existed before the universe.
I haven't invoked physics yet.
Well, I hear you saying that. I don't actually accept that. I think you're talking about things.
What have I said that had to do with physics? Other than...
I think that,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think that talking about what came before the universe, I think that would probably be in the domain of physics.
What do you think physics studies?
Well, I mean, what are you going to try to pigeonhole me on physics studies physical things?
Yeah.
I mean, the way that physical things come into existence would be of interest to physics.
All
the
physics
Big Bang
knows,
is of
right?
interest to
All
physics.
physics can say is something like either the universe has always existed, that is plausible to think that based on the observations we make, or the universe may have had a beginning. Right? And there is a slight scientific consensus, right, that the universe had a beginning.
Okay, but wait, when you're talking about what created the universe has to be immaterial, so there's just basically two problems there. The first is that I don't actually see how it has to be immaterial. It could be that there is physical matter.
I was trying to
outline
that for you, and I'm going to try again. So instead of
yeah,
using the word
well,
universe,
wait,
are you
wait,
interested
Danny,
or no?
Danny,
if you're not interested,
you're kind of starting to chomp at the bit a little here because I didn't even get to lay out my point there. So there's two things, right? So when you're talking about how the universe was created, and you're talking about it must have been immaterial before the universe, I don't actually know that that's true. It could be that it was some kind of rearrangement of something that was physical. So I don't actually know that's true. That seems to me currently like a non sequitur. And then the second point that I would have to say to that is even if it was immaterial, the fact that God fits into the category immaterial, like you could say technically that raises the probability, but there's an infinite amount of immaterial things. So you've raised it by what, 0.0000001% towards it being God?
Okay, let me address your first point, okay? So
Sure.
I think the word universe might be confusing. Let's just use the phrase all physical material, okay? Now, if it's the case that all physical material came into existence at a particular point, then everything causally prior must be non-physical. Because if it is physical...
So
wait, you're not letting me talk. You're not letting me talk, okay?
I was going to actually reject a premise there.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't actually know that all physical matter came into existence at that point. It could be that it was rearranged in some way. I don't know that it was created out of the blue, or that there was nothing physical before it.
Do you think that all physical material has always existed?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
This is why I think I mean, not to insult, but it's not fruitful to have a conversation with someone that's just saying, I don't know.
Well, you're insisting you know, but I'm not seeing a persuasive argument. I think my position's more honest.
You don't have a position. You just said, I don't know.
Yeah, when you don't have good reasons to believe something, that's what you should say.
Yeah, so why should I talk to you about
You don't
this?
have to.
Okay, goodbye. Have a good one. Thanks for the conversation. It was great.
What are you...
Wait.
I do have to say one thing, though, Danny. We had a perfectly respectful conversation. Then it reaches the God arguments, and you get kind of like triggered. Like, I'm not being a dick to you. Do you think I'm
never
being
said
mean
you
to
were, but it's just saying that you're saying that I'm wrong, and then I'm asking
I'm
you
not
why,
saying you're wrong.
and you're saying
just
I don't know.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I'm not persuaded by what you're saying. And I mean, I've kind of told you what my issue is there. You know what, Danny? How about, like, I don't mean to condescend or anything, but you sound just a little incensed. So why don't you just chill out for a few minutes, and if you want to come back and go at it, I'm happy to. If
that's what you prefer, maybe then that's fine.
Well, just in all honesty, are you kind of annoyed? You sound kind of annoyed.
Well, it is frustrating when I'm told that I don't know my position, that I could be erroneous because I'm ignorant of something, when you're the one that's saying I don't know.
Yeah, but the difference is that you're making a positive claim.
Yeah, I'm saying that it's plausible to think that the universe began, and you haven't provided anything to the contrary.
No, it's plausible to think it began. Maybe it began.
No. There's a difference between plausibility and possibility. We've gone over this too.
Okay, so I guess I would say it's possible. I mean, I don't know if it began or if there was something else before.
Were you taught in school how old the universe was? And I don't expect you to know the number.
Yeah, but I don't know the exact number. I understand there is a Big Bang, but I don't know what existed before that.
If the universe is defined as all physical material, right, then it's a logical impossibility to have physical material prior to when the universe began.
If you define the universe as all physical things, all I know is that there was a Big Bang. I mean, according to our current scientific models. I don't know what exactly was before that. I don't know if the Big Bang was in some way some kind of rearrangement of physical matter, or if it was actually the creation.
You see the contradiction there. If you're saying that the universe, okay, it's plausible that the universe began, but there could have been physical stuff prior to the universe. That's a contradiction.
I don't understand how that's a contradiction.
Okay,
I don't know.
Listen, if you say all physical material begins at a point, right, then that includes everything with the word physical on it has to begin at that point. Anything causally prior. Well, so I thought you just conceded that it's plausible to think that the universe began. If we just define the universe as all physical material, then you're stuck.
It's possible. I mean, I don't know.
Again,
I don't
we're
know
not dealing with possibilities. We're dealing with plausibilities.
Okay, well, I am genuinely not sure. I don't know if all physical matter was created at that point, or if there was physical matter before and it was rearranged in some kind of way. I have no idea.
Okay,
not a physicist.
Well, then it's not fruit. This is why I didn't want to have the conversation, because you haven't looked into the issue. It's not to say that you're stupid. I mean, I'm ignorant about a lot of things too, but I mean, there's just nowhere to go. Now, I would love to hear an argument as to why it may be eternal, right? And maybe we could talk about that, but you don't have a position on this issue.
Yeah, but I'm not persuaded by what you're saying. Why should I believe that everything began at that point?
Well,
I mean, how do you know there wasn't something before?
Basic cosmological models, right? We can talk about the Roger Penrose and the Stephen Hawking idea of a singularity.
Okay, yeah, that's not a conversation I'll cut you off right there. That's not a conversation I'm prepared to have. I'm not a physicist.
That's fine.
So I don't
it wasn't to insult you, right? It's just saying that we gotta.
I'm not, bro. I'm honestly not insulted. The only thing that ever annoys me is intellectually dishonest people. Like if you go into the Krill server or something, you get people talking over you, not listening. Like that annoys me. As long as people are listening and going back and forth, I won't be annoyed. So let's just, for the sake of argument, just say that it was immaterial, which I'm not persuaded of. But let's just say that was the case.
So my next question is: if the thing that is causally prior to whatever physical material that began to exist is immaterial, does that raise the probability that that object is God?
Probably, but not by some large amount.
Okay, well, what if I said that it had to be super powerful? So something that's immaterial and very powerful.
I mean, couldn't you equally well say it's just Thor or some other thing?
Well, Thor is
some big energetic force or something.
Is Thor immaterial?
No, possibly.
Okay, well then, what you mean by Thor then is just God.
Okay, you're not talking Christian God specifically. You're arguing from like a deistic.
Exactly.
Kind of
I haven't gotten to why Christianity is rationally viable.
Okay. No, that's fine. Yeah. So I mean, if you're just saying it's something immaterial and something powerful, I mean, that's not evidence that it's God. If you want to say that
you don't think it is. Well, let me explain why. Right? If we said the universe was something like some physical material, okay. And then we said that some physical material was caused by other physical material, and that physical material has always existed. That would, to me, go against the God hypothesis, right? Because God is immaterial as deists and theists define him, right? So that's what you would expect. But in this case, the argument that I'm presenting, whatever's causally prior to the universe is immaterial in virtue of the universe being all physical material.
Yeah, so if you're just saying that you hold the position that whatever existed before the universe was immaterial and that whatever caused the universe was powerful, you've got two qualities on the table, immaterial and powerful, and then you're saying God has those properties, so that raises the likelihood that it's God.
And you admitted to that, and that's what I would qualify as evidence.
I would consider that like very, very weak evidence.
Okay, but at first you said that, I don't know, do you think there is, so you do think that there is weak evidence for God then?
Okay, this JoVonn guy is so dishonest. I'm just booting this fuck.
Poor JoVonn, he's actually a good friend of mine.
He's a retard. So what you're talking, okay, well his comments, I see the guy on my YouTube channel sometimes, annoying as fuck. So when you're when you're talking about this, it's like, yeah, I mean, if you say something raises the probability, that's not a demonstration that it's true.
Isn't that what evidence does, right? If you see cat hairs near the drink that's been spilled, that raises the probability that it was the cat that spilled over your drink.
Yeah, it's a pretty massive stretch. Like, I'm all for logic and evidence and whatever it is you want to talk about, but when you're saying, you know, you first of all, you're hinging it on this premise that whatever existed before the universe was immaterial. Not persuaded if that's possible. I'm not sure. And then you're saying, you know, God is also immaterial, and whatever created the Big Bang must be powerful. I mean, I don't know if it has to be powerful. It's possible it's powerful. But again, even if you accept that it's immaterial and it's powerful, it's like, okay, well, I mean, how does that demonstrate it's God? If you're just saying it raises the probability, it's like, okay, but that doesn't persuade me that it's God.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know you're going to be upset about what I'm about to say, but I'm not going to continue in a conversation anymore if JoVonn's banned from the server.
That's fine.
Okay.
You don't have to.
That's fine. Have a good one.
Okay. Yeah, but someone who's going to say they're not going to talk to me will probably also be banned. So I'm just going to give you a chance before I boot you. Are you sure that's the position you want to take?
I'll answer any questions not pertaining to the discussion, the dialectic we were having. That's fine. I won't ignore you.
Well, so you want to move off this point, basically?
Yeah, that's fine. Call me a coward. Call me a running bitch. That's fine. I don't care.
Well, I'm not calling you a running bitch. I'm just saying that this is not a strong argument. So you're just saying, you know, you're hinging it on whatever it created the universe must be immaterial, must be powerful.
I'm not continuing this discussion. If you want to ask me any other question about anything else, I'm fine to answer.
Okay, if you want to concede it's a weak argument, then yeah,
I don't
because
think I
it's a weak argument.
I think you're just saying
it's a pretty weak argument. I mean, you're saying that, you know, whatever created the universe must be immaterial. It must be powerful. I don't see proof of that. And then you're saying God shares those qualities, so that raises the probability of it being God. So if you buy those two premises, then sure, it raises the probability. But even at that point, that's not actually a demonstration that there's any reasonable level of evidence that you believe it's God.
I heard you.
Yeah, I mean, you think if I find something that happens and I find two qualities that must be true of the thing that did that action, that's a good reason to believe that particular thing caused the action?
I heard that as well.
Well, why are you being like that? I don't know.
I'll explain it again. You banned JoVonn for no good reason, and I'm not going to engage in this dialectic anymore until he's unbanned. And if you
wait a minute,
I don't appreciate ultimatums, Danny. So I don't want to. I'm not keeping someone in my server.
I predicted that you wouldn't like it.
Well, yeah, no. Whoever's talking, just be quiet, Danny. I'm not. It's fine, Danny. You've been pretty respectful. I've had no problem with you or anything, but I'm not going to have people in my server who take that kind of attitude towards me.
I don't hold anything against you for that other than I'm not going to have the dialectic.
Yeah, but you're just being bitchy. It's like, why be like that?
I'm sorry.
It's not Christ-like.
Actually, Danny, I have a question. Why is Christianity the correct and not Hinduism or some shit?
Well, no. Okay, come on. No, that's a whole other route. So, I mean, look, I don't mean to be a dick, but it's just like, if you're gonna be taking some weird bitchy attitude towards me, I'm not down for that. So, I mean, do you want to continue an honest, open discussion?
I'd like to after JoVonn is unbanned.
Okay, Danny, I'm not going to just unban your friend because you're trying to pressure me. I don't care about talking to you enough that I would.
That's fine. I'll just leave then. That's okay.
I don't get why you're being so bitchy. It's just a conversation.
Why would you care? You don't want to talk to me. You just admitted that.
No, it's not. That's also a straw man. I didn't say I don't want to talk to you. I said I don't
whether
care
I left or not, right?
No, that's not even what I said. I like talking to you, but I'm saying I don't care enough about talking to you that I'm going to let you use your presence in the server to leverage me into doing something I don't want to do.
But I'm gonna be adamant about this. So there's no point in talking to me, right? We're both stonewalls here.
What I'll say right now is, so I'm going to ban you from the server right now. But if you want to come back with just an honest, open mind and have discussions in a non-restricted, ultimatum-based way, then that's totally fine. So I'll give you a last chance to.
No, go ahead and ban me.
Yeah, Okay, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, let me know if you ever change on that.
Okay. JoVonn, I got banned for sticking up for you.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I told him I'm not talking to you until you unban JoVonn, and And he got banned.
Danny started defending you
Did you
as
see
soon as
what I
you were
wrote?
banned.
Yeah,
Danny,
I
did
know.
you record it?
It's all recorded, boys.
Oh, thank you.
Did you see what I wrote, Danny?
Yeah, it was like the most
Mundane
Like
thing.
innocuous, yeah.
I just wrote, "Hey, Danny." He said that it's increases the likelihood, but it's not evidence. Put that together.
He's the one that's
And-
missing out.
And he banned me for that. Called me how does that dishonest in any way?
That is crazy.